Welcome back to The Conversation. I'm Francesca Fiorentini. Our next guest is a white-collar attorney, crime attorney, there you go, and an author who's got a new book that I'm super excited to read. It is called Unprecedented, A Simple Guide to the Crimes of the Trump Campaign and Presidency. I'm holding it up there, it's right there. Please welcome Sara Azari, how are you?
Good, thank you, Francesca. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, thanks for writing this book. Why did you write this book? Is it because it's just too much to follow?
Yeah, so I wrote the book not because of right versus left, but because of right versus wrong. I'm an immigrant. I came here for democracy and freedom, like many other people. And as a lawyer, I firmly believe in the idea that no man is above the law. Until I saw, this presidency began in 2017 with Trump, it was like on a daily basis, fundamental rights being eviscerated, human rights being obliterated. And the questions that I was being asked by people was no longer, how do you represent someone that you actually know is guilty? How do you go to sleep at night? Right. It was more like, is the president going to jail? Is his son going to get indicted? And I thought, wait a second, there's something really wrong here, And yes, to your point, I wrote it to make it so understandable. I wrote about the Mueller investigation and the Russia investigation, and as we see, all roads lead to Russia, and it all comes back to Russia. We get Stone, who's, recently there was a sentencing recommendation for him, and now we have a second Department of Justice, especially for the president's felon friends.
Yes.
And so Stone is that critical piece that connected the president to the Russian interference, and so this is still relevant. It is a sore spot for the president, and any chance he gets, he attacks the Mueller investigation. He calls it a hoax and witch hunt still, even though he says it exonerated him.
Which is a clue that it absolutely still matters.
Absolutely.
And that what we're seeing now is linked to that.
The man does not want to accept the fact that he cheated on an election, and everyone now knows about it. So he tries to undermine this investigation, and yet, these court documents are murky, they're dense, they're daunting, and then the Mueller report, most of my lawyer friends put it down after about 100 pages.
Look, I skimmed. Yeah. I am not a lawyer, but I skimmed and I tried to make sense of it. I think a lot of it's still redacted to the public.
Absolutely, the parts about Stone were redacted. I think there was some Congress made some motions to get the unredacted, distributed publicly. But I felt that there needs to be just a essential guide that anyone can read and understand, because this was something that was unprecedented at the time I wrote it, but now we see with Ukraine that he was emboldened. The day after Mueller testified, he picked up the phone to Zelensky. So it's no longer unprecedented. It's part of the same playbook, just a different act.
Sure. I wanted to ask about the most recent set of crimes, and you sort of talked about it in terms of Stone and the way that the Justice Department has now been wielded to benefit Trump's indicted and sentenced or awaiting sentenced allies. Can you just walk us through what's going on and maybe your take as a lawyer?
It's absolutely appalling to me. It's like I can't walk into court the next time I'm in a federal district court with a sentencing and say, hey, I need the Stone treatment, because my client is not the president's friend. So we have, for the first time in our history, we have two departments of justice, one for the president's felon friends, one for the rest of us. And the idea that the attorney general intervenes on a sentencing recommendation by line prosecutors is absolutely appalling. It is unheard of. It has not happened. And so the argument by the other side is, of course, line prosecutors need supervision. Of course they have supervision. But that ladder that goes all the way up and ends at the AG is a very long one.
Got it.
So, for the attorney general to come in and say, wait, hold on, give me this case and give me this case, and hand pick the ones that he needs to reopen and look at, is really, it's weaponizing the Department of Justice is all it is, and it really undermines the department. I think these prosecutors that are, career prosecutors there are having a very difficult time doing their job. They're losing credibility because people like me will come in and say, well, I want the same treatment.
Sure. I mean, I think that there's people who aren't lawyers and again, who are outside of it, and who also just sort of assume that sort of all corruption is kind of equal and oh yeah, what do you expect? This is very much outside and beyond the pale.
Absolutely, and so is like the pardon spree that the president went on last week. I wrote about pardons as well and his abuse of the pardon power. It's no coincidence that he offered these clemencies on the eve of Stone's sentencing.
Right.
I mean, talk about timing. If that doesn't give us a hint as to what he's going to do for Stone, I don't know what will.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like you could just pardon on your way out the door, which we hope there is a door in November. But another thing that as I was sort of researching for this, I found, and this was like a couple weeks ago, but that actually Barr is renamed a federal prosecutor for Michael Flynn's case to review. Michael Flynn has been awaiting sentencing. He's the former national security advisor. I guess he lied to the FBI. So what does that mean? You're gonna review?
Well, he lied to the FBI and the judge was not happy with him. The judge actually held him to a higher standard because of his background and said, go do some more cooperation, come back and I'll revisit your sentence because I'm inclined to give you some time, which is what happened the first time he went in for sentencing. Right. And so now, Barr is micromanaging his case, has a special group of prosecutors, outside prosecutors reviewing that case. So, this is not limited to Flynn and Stone. We're gonna see this happening with anyone that the president feels it is in his interest to help. Because this is not really about Stone and Flynn. This is about, the president is about the me, not the we. And so ultimately, it's what's going to help him. And like we talked about it, this Russia investigation and the interference by Russia has been a big issue for him. He tried to blame it on Ukraine. I mean, he every chance he gets, aside from his angry tweets, he will try to undermine this investigation.
So you're saying he's acting kind of guilty in your professional opinion?
Yeah, of course, for sure.
What about, okay, so we know the president was impeached on this Ukraine stuff, right? Asking a foreign government to interfere in a domestic election by investigating Joe Biden.
Fake investigating
Joe Biden. Do you think he should have been impeached on more than that?
Absolutely. I feel that he has not been held accountable on what I've discussed in the Russia investigation, and that's what challenged that idea of no man is above the law. Because Nancy Pelosi last fall, when she announced the impeachment inquiry into the Ukraine scheme, she said, that the Mueller stuff was just not understandable enough for the American people. So now what? We move forward and we set a precedent that we can have a president who's corrupt, who obstructs justice, who obstructs Congress, and if it's too complicated, we're just gonna let it go. It's where politics really screws with the law.
Yeah.
And accountability. And so, I think number one, they could have actually had a separate article for bribery, which they didn't. They just kind of snuck it under abuse of power. And they didn't address the stuff at all. I mean, they alleged that he had obstructed justice, referring to Mueller or the Russia investigation, but they really, the articles were about obstruction of Congress, not justice. And the fact that he wouldn't let witnesses and wouldn't, let witnesses testify, wouldn't provide information and documents. And so, I think the Democrats could have gone further, but I understand the strategy, trying to keep it clean and concise and, less is more kind of idea. But God, there's no shortage with this president,
there's no shortage of it. I mean, my big question is what happens if Trump gets 4 more years? And then what happens if he doesn't? Meaning, is there any accountability for the crimes that have been committed?
So there's so many criminal investigations by the Southern District of New York, by the state of New York, against the Trump organization, against Trump himself, that if he walked out of the doors of the White House, he's indictable. You know, he could face, you know, right now as a president, he can't be indicted. But once he leaves office, he could be indicted, and there's no statute of limitations that applies because he was president for a certain period of time.
Unlike some of the sexual assault charges he might be facing.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff that and you know, like what I say is there's probably so much more that this man has done that we don't know about yet. And if he's going to be president for 4 more years, trust and believe this scheme is going to continue. This abuse of power is going to escalate, and you know. Look, there's been no precedent for this, but there's no prohibition against a second impeachment. A president can be impeached multiple times.
I was going to say, I mean, we just had the exercise. It's almost like we got that muscle worked out. We know how to do it.
Except it's election year. It's not a good political move.
Sure.
But there is no prohibition against multiple impeachments. So, hey, if he's president for 4 more years and if he moves forward in the manner that he has been, he opens himself up to other potential impeachable offenses.
Right. And I mean, a lot of folks think that like the courts will save us, the courts will save us. How are you seeing that play out now, and especially with all of the federal judicial appointments? What are your thoughts on the future of the judicial system?
Justice Sotomayor the other day came out and said that she's seeing a pattern within the Supreme Court, which is that the justices that the president has appointed to the bench are ruling in his favor in the sense that they're getting petitions, cases that need to be heard that involve the president, and they're just kind of putting it away, stashing it away, and issuing a stay on a ruling on those cases. So they're timing when they're going to hear those cases because this is election year essentially. And so we know from the inside of the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land, that there's some funny business going on, that his appointees are protecting him, you know, and that's what we predicted would happen. And same goes with all the district court judges that he's placed, you know, in different courts, and who are extremely conservative, who I'm sure he selected very carefully, because again, he will choose what's good for him.
Sure. And Mitch McConnell. With his arms being guided by Mitch McConnell. Okay, unprecedented. A simple guide, a very simple guide to the crimes of the Trump campaign and presidency, as if they were simple at all. But thank you so much, Sara Azari, for joining me, for writing this. Get that book. And thank you so much for joining us on the conversation. We will see you next time.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.